Good day. It's LevanS.Mortgages in my new show, Interview with a Pro. Today I'm happy to introduce Bennet Kim, who is a real estate agent specializing in commercial real estate. Bennet, thank you for coming today. Thank you for coming. So let's start, right?
Sure.
So just jump into great. Let's start with the questions in today's context, right? It was tough to 2018. What was it for you, and how you see commercial real estate in today's market?
In 2018, it was a good year, generally speaking. There has been a tremendous amount of activities. Commercial is still continuing to be a area that investors are looking at, primarily because of the stabilized cash flows and the opportunity, considering that the interest rates are still low, to create value in commercial real estate. Generally speaking, there's still a lot of appetite for retail, a lot of appetite for a combination of apartments as well as commercial. And generally speaking, it's just across the board. People are always looking for opportunities where they can actually get yield from their assets.
Compared to residential real estate, which excitement went down after new regulations and interest rates went up, so there is not so much activity on the market. How it's for commercial real estate? Does it go up? Do you prefer and suggest moving and investing to commercial real estate, or how is it compared to residential?
Sure. In terms of the residential market, I get a little bit confused because when people speak about residential as being a commercial asset, they tend to think about houses and that they're rented out. In terms of, there's still a strong appetite on the commercial side, meaning a sixplex plus, anywhere with 6 units and larger. The apartment building market still continues to be very good, generally speaking, because of the fact that you can still get senior housing, 95%, I think about 20% of the down payment, and then 80% financing on commercial assets, which is the highest. Generally speaking, there's still a strong appetite. Yields are dropping because there is that demand.
Yeah.
In this environment, there is a bit of concern if interest rates start to go up. That is a major concern for, especially an apartment, because it's so sensitive to the yields are so low already, right? But on the other side of retail, industrial is extremely tight. The industrial market, next to the apartment buildings, industrial actually is probably a next asset in terms of risk that you want to go up to. And it's extremely tight. For example, I'm having a tough time finding industrial properties for not just investors, but people who actually want to rent. Mm-hmm. So the vacancy allowance is less than like 5% across the city. Usually below 6% is when developers actually start to build on spec. That isn't happening as quickly as it should.
When did you get an idea of BLITZ?
I wanted to be different. I didn't know how to say, hey, another agent that deals with something home, the best. I just wanted to try something different. There are very few people, and actually there's nobody that does martial arts.
Yeah.
Who's an agent. So generally speaking, that's how I came up with it. It's actually a good talking point.
You mentioned rent. Is it economically reasonable now for like small businesses and people who want to have some ideas to start their own businesses? Is it reasonable to start with rents, and or they're that high that they will kill all the margins?
The interesting that you should speak about that. In my experience, this is the first generation, or is an emerging generation. I can't tell, but generally speaking, young people are not finding jobs in the labor market. They're actually starting their own small businesses, whether it's tech, whether it's home-based businesses. It's a totally different mindset. There's a lot more entrepreneurial spirit, and because of that, there is a combination of that on top of that low inventory that's causing tremendous demand for small retail as well as small industrial. which is difficult to find. It's a very different environment. I think the new generation is realizing that they can't depend on finding a workplace because they're hearing about the restructurings and the constant layoffs. They don't want to be in that position after graduating from either college or university. If you heard the recent announcement about GM letting go about 15,000 people in Oshawa, I mean, that actually also there's about for every job lost at GM, there's 7 auto parts makers actually losing their jobs. So the ripple effect is huge. So consequently, to your issue with regards to interest rates, I don't see interest rates rising that quickly because of these new challenges coming about.
And they're coming for sure.
Yes.
And so, what's next? What's the future for commercial real estate?
Commercial real estate continues to be very vibrant. The question becomes, if you're going to be an investor, you got to find it's about timing, the ability to add value, and be able to control your construction costs. Those are the 3 major issues. For example, if you want to set up just a basic shell retail, I'm actually working on a project right now out in Brampton, which is a daycare facility. Generally speaking, for a retail, it's anywhere between to fit out the space, it's anywhere between $60 to $80 a square foot. That's a huge investment that ultimately you actually have to spend, right? So timing, pricing, rent is on its way up. So consequently, you actually have to fit into your business plan. Don't worry about the rent itself, but how does it relate to your actually overall projected real estate income? For commercial real estate, for electronics, every type of business is different, but it can range between 20 to about 40% of your rent, of your gross revenues being siphoned off or as being an operating expense for rent.
Yeah. How last year tax for commercial real estate property tax was increased by 100%, and if you walk down the Yonge, you saw like lots of businesses were closing.
Right.
Did it really affect the market, or it's still the market is stable and strong?
Taxes for commercial has always been traditionally 4 times higher than residential. So the commercial rates actually subsidize the residential rates. So the challenge becomes if you're going to be a self-employed person, you really got to take that into account. The rent is the rent, but the taxes is another issue, which you brought up a very good point. So consequently, it doesn't really affect the leasing market per se. It just takes a little bit longer to get leased out, but also recognizing that the market now is more filled with, instead of self-employed individuals, those type of spaces like say downtown Toronto, the major urban centers, right, where there's a core area. A lot of it is taken up by national retailers. So like the Starbucks. What's another one that's coming in? There's that's probably the one that comes to mind the most. It is challenging for like coffee shops like Second Cup or a coffee culture, right?
And what about commercial real estate is still a long-term investment, right?
Yes.
And you see all the magazine articles regarding that all the businesses moving online, and so how it can affect retail commercial real estate in terms of that if all the shops moving to online deliveries and everything. So what's happening with that? So
well, that's interesting that you should say that, because Amazon, they started out as online, but they now actually have bricks and mortar
actually
in New York City in particular, right? So the online presence, once you actually placed another successful online business as well as a storefront business out in Little Italy. They started out in the East End, they bought a building, they ultimately expanded also into Little Italy. So to answer your question, generally speaking, the online presence is huge. There's no doubt about that. The requirement of space becomes less attractive, but once you reach a certain critical mass, what that critical mass has to be determined within your business plan, having a storefront and having that sign recognition adds value to your online business. So ultimately, as long as you have a physical presence that complements your online business, you actually do exceptionally well.
Well, there's you want to say something?
Yeah. Lastly, the last large retailer that came online like not too long ago was Walmart.
Yeah.
Their online presence is now increasing. I think at between 20 to 30% per year. So they've realized that the importance of online, not just storefront. You don't see Walmart shutting down stores though.
Yeah.
They're still using the bricks and mortars to get people there.
That's true. You deal with stress because industry is very stressful.
Right. How do I deal with stress? How do I deal with stress? Generally speaking, I don't get myself worked up about anything. Deals come, deals go. People come and people go. So generally speaking, you try to work with them as best as you can. I don't really try not to get myself stressed out. If I do feel stressed out, I just walk away and basically don't work out. And that helps, and it alleviates. There's always a new door that always opens.
Other question is you heard about and everyone heard about golden rule of real estate is location, location, location. With commercial real estate, is it necessary to aim to downtown and prime positions or locations, or probably find cheaper opportunities but still with a bigger yield in less developed areas?
In the previous generation of real estate, you're right. Location, location, location. There was a premium. Today, it's a different story. Now you can have a mediocre location, but your online presence has to be exceptional, i.e., Facebook, websites, and so forth, directing traffic, using Google in order to direct people's attention to your website and eventually go to your storefront business. The interesting thing is, though, the new generation doesn't like that initial human interaction. So therefore, you actually have to have a presence online first and foremost before you actually think about the old traditional bricks and mortar approach, right? If you have a service, that's a different story. You don't have a choice but to have a location, but you really actually have to have an online presence in a significant way just to attract attention.
So now, just to make sure I understand, so now it doesn't matter where you're located. It's your face is on online, and and you can just have a store not in a prime location, but something cheaper, and probably invest more in online rather than on a place downtown prime.
The alternative is this: if you're a startup business, you don't normally go into a retail. What you may look for that is a hybrid between commercial and industrial. So, for example, fitness gyms, they used to be in the retail area or in basements, but now they're actually in more industrial. So you have to be able, because industrial as a whole provides you with a lot more flexibility and a much more less expensive option for you. Right?
Yep.
For example, retail typically could start at like $15 a square foot net, whereas as an industrial building may start at actually around $8 or $9 a square foot net. That's a huge difference. More importantly, the retail, on the additional rents and the TMI is about $12 to $15 a square foot net, $12 to $15, whereas an industrial building, again, is around $4 a square foot. That's a huge savings. So if you're a startup business, being an industrial probably makes more and more sense if you want to move out of your home-based business. Ultimately, that's a choice you have to eventually make, right? Again, it's about critical mass. When does that critical mass happen? And then actually you have to start spending money on actual bricks and mortar leases.
I see. Lots of questions I get from my friends and who want to start business. Signing a lease, what they should look to not get trapped, right, in a contract?
Okay. The several issue, especially with landlords these days, they still feel burned from the early 90s. So having an indemnification, a personal guarantee, still remains a big issue. If you are starting a business and you have no desire whatsoever to indemnify the lease, the landlord's not going to look at you, because at the end of the day, if you're not going to put some skin in the game, they really don't. Then you don't really believe in your business.
Yeah.
That's their point of view. That's one issue. The second issue is that has to do with renovations. If you renovate your space, recognize that you no longer own those renovations. It actually is now part of the landlord's property. So you have to recognize that's a major issue. But that's standard across the board.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, in order for your space to be leased out, if you decide to vacate it, they may have what is known as a restoration clause, which means you bring it back to where it was previously. In retail, they like a shell. They want nothing in there, so if someone comes in, they can build it up the way they like, as opposed to them having to figure out, what you want and what you don't want,
mm-hmm.
right? The last thing has to do with, in older properties, redevelopment is a major issue, especially retail as well as industrial, because if you notice, a lot of the former industrial areas are now retail. So consequently, you actually have to take into account a redevelopment clause that will allow the landlord to essentially give you up to, let's say, 3 months notice. So you have to vacate premises, because they actually plan to tear down the entire building, right? And redevelop for other purposes.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So when you've invested so much money and time and effort in your business, to find alternative space is extremely difficult. So generally speaking, we find clauses that actually works as a compromise, as opposed to 3 months, 3 months prior warning. You can get up to 2 years, depending on the lease term. I'll give an example. I did a 10-year industrial lease. They had that clause in there. It was a publicly traded company. They wanted only 30 days, not 30 days, I think it was like three months notice. I said, there's no way we're going to sign a 10-year lease. So if you're only going to give us 3 months. So ultimately they went back and came back with a compromise. They would have a 10-year lease,
mm-hmm.
7-year, they would have up to 7 years to exercise that termination, and then you would get 2 years prior notice. So you can actually start looking there. So they have the intent to actually demolish the space.
Mm.
But nonetheless, if they don't exercise it after 7 years, you still continue to remain. Things like that.
Interesting, Bennet. So if you don't mind, I want to go to next section of my interview. It's BLITZ questions. So I'll ask you 10 questions and you should answer them as quick as possible.
Excellent.
Do you love your job?
Love it to death, yes.
Most exciting thing about your job?
Meeting people who have exciting ideas.
What do you do during slow periods?
During slow period, make phone calls, go out there and meet people, make sure that they understand that I'm here to help them out.
Have you ever hated your job?
On occasions.
Your favorite food?
My favorite food is souvlaki.
How you dealt with annoying customers?
You can't. You just have to roll with them, right?
Taekwondo or karate?
Taekwondo all the way.
Bruce Lee or Chuck Norris?
Oh, that's a hard one. Bruce Lee, just generally.
Who was your best Taekwondo student?
That's a very good question. You!
What's your childhood dream?
My childhood dream is essentially, essentially just, make other people happy. More than anything else, do a good job. If, my happiness is derived from how I'm able to serve others.
Oh, fantastic, Bennet. Thank you so much for coming. It was wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment. Everything helps. And see you next time.